Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another live with me, Samarth, at Growing Young. Today, we're going to be covering all about diabetes and lifestyle. Particularly, we're speaking about travel. And if you were in the previous live, then you would have seen what we had covered is particularly diabetes and stress and the effects of stress on diabetes and all the myths that we had to break through about different hormones like cortisol, which you would have definitely seen if you have Googled stress before. And we also spoke about really the difference between what stress can do to your diabetes and what your just normal lifestyle and damage that you have accumulated over the years can do to diabetes and the difference between the two, right? Where can you draw the line between the damage that you have accumulated just because of lifestyle and stress? Where is that line, particularly for diabetes? That's what we had covered last week. So, if that is something you're curious to know about, just go watch the previous live. But today, we're going to be covering traveling and what it can do for diabetes. And we're also, just like we did last time, we're going to draw the line between what travel is doing for diabetes versus what the accumulated damage of your lifestyle has already done. If you are a busy professional who is suffering from diabetes and would like to overcome it, not just manage it. So that's what we're going to cover today. Having said that, let me first begin by looking at what an average day looks like for an individual who is very busy, who is in an executive role, or let's say even a managerial role, travels frequently, and has diabetes. So let's say on an average Tuesday, you wake up, you have to catch an early morning flight, so sleep is already messed up, which means that your blood sugar levels are going to be slightly higher than usual, anyways. Then what happens? You rush to the airport to get onto a flight. Now you move to another city, most likely domestic. If not, you move to another country, which is that now you're going across time zones, which is even worse for your stress levels, for your blood sugar levels as well. And then what happens? During this period, either you eat food on the flight, or maybe you've bought something in the airport as quickly as you can. You now your body is just filled with things that you usually wouldn't have eaten but have eaten because of this sudden emergency, or let's say the requirement of the situation. And now you're off to work. Right? Most of the people that I know, most of the executives and entrepreneurs that I work with, usually get off the flight and immediately run to the meeting that they may have at their hotel or wherever it's hosted at. Now, what happens? Now, they either have a client meeting or a team meeting they have to go to, so they eat a little bit more. And then what happens? And then they get back exhausted, sleep deprived to their hotel, and then they crash out. Right? They sleep as much as they can, hoping that tomorrow will be a little bit easier. This is usually what happens to an individual, especially a busy professional who is continuously traveling either between cities or countries to get the job done. Now, let's look at this entirety of things. Right? First of all, if someone is diabetic, and if you have seen the last two lives that we did, you would have understood that if someone is diabetic, they most likely would have lost a lot of muscle mass, even before gaining a lot of that visceral fat, which means the belly fat, or gaining fat overall. So, if this individual is already diabetic, it is safe to say that having poor sleep, or let's say somewhat poor sleep, even if you're getting the 6 hours and you wake up feeling recharged, that is not enough for your blood sugar levels. But, anyways, I am no one to judge because everyone's life is hard. But if that is the case, then it starts off there. Right now, this individual gets up by their accumulated actions from their life. They are already low on muscle mass, most likely high on visceral fat or overall fat, and have a relatively poor sleep because they do look like they're traveling frequently. And when I say frequently, I mean roughly around, say, 7 to 10 days a month, right? So almost one third of the month, this individual seems to be traveling. So, of course, their sleep will not be 100% optimal. This is already where they're currently at. Now, what does traveling do to actually make their diabetes worse, right? Where is the line? This line actually comes between your current lifestyle and the few things that I mentioned before, which is the poor sleep because you got to catch the flight, right? The ad hoc eating that happens either before the flight in the airport or in the flight itself, then the meeting, then the tiredness after the meeting, and due to the lack of activity in all of this. And when I say activity, I mean particularly muscle building activity, right? We're not speaking about things like walking. Walking uses your muscles, it does not grow your muscles, which is why marathon runners have skinny legs. They don't have massive legs, regardless of how much they walk or run. So remember, big difference. But anyways, coming back to what I was saying, all the activity and then the lack of sleep or the catching up of sleep that they have to do that night. This essentially, on a rough average, say that because it puts off people from their current schedule by, let's say, around 30 to 40%. Because let's face it, if they're not traveling, it's not like their life is not like equally as hectic. It is just that they get to sleep a little bit better, hopefully. Most people don't, but they get to sleep a little bit better. And on top of that, they may eat a little bit more controlled when they're at home. Now, looking at all the pictures of what I have seen people eat, most people just eat things like, dal, roti, rice, sabzi as a staple. And they think that this is disciplined eating. It is better than, of course, force feeding yourself junk all the time. But for a diabetic, this is definitely not the ideal diet. And we'll go into what the ideal diet looks like for different individuals or different segments of people around the world in another life. But today, what we are looking at is the small difference that comes from eating outside, which means most likely higher fat food, higher processed foods, will def- deteriorate their diabetes, but not by as bad as you would think if it was just that alone, right? If at all an individual was just changing their food habits, like for example, on the day they travel, if they don't travel and eat that food, it may deteriorate the blood sugar by say 10 to 15%. The lack of sleep, however, actually acts as a multiplier on top of this. Now, one of the common mistakes that I have seen people do is that during this time, because they seem to be traveling so frequently and because of the lack of availability of using the washroom, they tend to decrease their water intake as well. Now, notice that although these things, like, the small deterioration in food, the small deterioration in sleep, the small deterioration in physical activity or the right kind of physical activity, and the small deterioration in water intake, individually, these are all small deteriorations. But added together, they form a larger deterioration. Now, for what I have seen on an average, and don't quote me on this because there really is no study to show all of these multiple factors, particularly for busy professionals of a certain race or ethnicity. For what I have seen on an average, by living this lifestyle, people tend to deteriorate in terms of diabetes almost around 20 to 30% faster. Right. And to give you an example, if let's say an individual took 10 years to get from X HbA1c to 2x HbA1c, if they took 10 years to get here without travel, with travel, it happens in, let's say, 7 years. And if they have poor genetics, maybe 5 years. So, although the changes are not drastic individually, like as in the water's just by this much, the sleep's just by this much, the food's just by this much, adding them all together makes it very, very, for a lack of better terms, messed up. over a 10-year span. Now, if you are someone dealing with diabetes and you're curious to know how can I actually overcome this for myself, right? And you're looking for a very specified solution, just type in the word rise into the comments and my team will reach out to you for a consult call with me and we can look at personalizing the situation. But right now, I'm going to cover on a generalistic sense what this looks like and what the differences are. Right? The number one thing that needs to be done if you are traveling, take account of it and sleep earlier. If possible, try to take the flight a night before so that you travel during the night and sleep well before you wake up the next day, if possible. If not possible, go to sleep earlier the day before. That is how we begin good travel, right? Because good practices begin not when you wake up, but they begin before you wake up. It's actually a good line. I think I'll use that sometime. But having said that, so that's the first thing that you do. The second thing that you do is you have a travel ready pack, particularly for protein. As you would know, it's easy to get carbs and fats pretty much anywhere and everywhere. But getting protein is quite difficult. So, usually, what I recommend my clients, of course, depending on the individual, this is on a general note, is to carry certain protein bars or figure out where in their airport they can get protein shakes so that if they don't want to really carry anything, they can just go into the airport, pick up a protein shake or two from the place, drink it. Now they've got some energy for the day, go about the day, right? So have a travel ready pack or protocol for what you need to eat. And remember, do not stray away from it, right? So now, if you have fixed your sleep, at least to a large extent, and you have fixed what it is that you're eating in the airport or let's say in the flight, but most likely I would say avoid flight food in totality. It's very rare that you get good flight food unless you're flying first class in places like Emirates, right? Because those guys, they will curate the menu a lot for you. If you're flying economy class, avoid flight food, right? Always get the protein shake or the whey protein before getting into the flight. If you really don't like protein or it doesn't adjust with you, it doesn't sit well with your stomach, I would highly recommend either just getting some grilled cottage cheese or grilled paneer, or I would recommend getting something like soya chunks if you're a vegetarian. You can get some high protein yogurt if you would like. If you're a non vegetarian, I would highly suggest something like chicken breast or maybe a fish steak or maybe a seafood steak, right? Prawns, squid. If you are somebody who likes to eat beef, then a leaner cut of beef. But with all of this, remember that when you are ordering it, wherever you're ordering it, whether it's on the in the airport or before the airport, remember that you need to tell the staff that you are almost allergic to high oil foods. Obviously, this is not true. Most of us can digest a high amount of fat. But I say the word allergic, although that is not a accurate scientific statement to say someone is allergic to fat, but I say the word allergic because it alerts them to be accurate with what they give you. Otherwise, what happens is you say put less oil, and they're like, yeah, yeah, I'll put less oil, and then they put the same shit anyways. So do not do that, right? Tell them that you are allergic or let's say even intolerant to high fat, so then they will put less oil. Now, this is critical. Usually, what happens here is that when people get something like paneer or even a chicken breast, it comes with a side of vegetables. Most people mistake and think that this is just vegetables. If it is boiled, then it is most likely just vegetables. But if they're saying it is sauteed, it will be higher in calories because sauteed does not happen without oil. Important to know, because oil or fat in itself is not bad for you. Too much of it is. And if you are somebody who's slightly overweight, then you already have a lot of it, right? But having said that, fixing the sleep and fixing the first meal of the day completely changes how your body responds the rest of the day. Now, obviously, because of this, you will have higher energy levels, because you have high energy levels. Most likely, your meetings or your presentations or whatever it is that you're traveling for is most likely going to go better. You are most likely going to travel, or let's say you're most likely going to move around with higher physical activity because of your energy levels, right? By doing just these two things, you would have offsetted this whole downward spiral that otherwise would have happened because you were traveling on your diabetes, right? But then comes a problem. Most of the people I know say that, Samarth, I don't want to sit and eat salad in front of my clients. Samarth, I can't not drink in front of my clients. I'd look like an idiot. And I think that's a fair assumption. Now, I'm not even going to get into the fact that if you have certain goals, you are supposed to sacrifice to get them, yada, yada, yada. I'll leave the motivational talk for another video. But it's very important to understand that, look, if at all this is a circumstance that you cannot avoid, right, that you must eat in order for you to win the business, win the teammate, win your boss over, remember that you always have the next meal and the next day to compensate. Now, how do you do that? I ate like a lot of food. I drank a lot. What am I supposed to do now? First things first, keep your sleep fixed. Sleep early, sleep more if possible. Take power naps if possible. Very important, because with poor sleep, there is not much you can do about insulin sensitivity, especially if you're over the age of 40 and you've not invested at least 10 years into building muscle mass. Not much you can do about bad sleep, right? So take your time, even though you don't fall asleep immediately. Try, try, spend those hours in the bed, because that could make or break your situation with diabetes. But having said that, and then since we're looking at only natural practices, right, we're not speaking about things like Ozempic over here, but since we're looking at natural practices, now that you have slept better, eaten better for your first meal, had better energy levels, so you'll be walking around more, have more physical activity. Again, walking is using your muscles, not growing your muscles, but it is relatively better than doing nothing. After that, I would highly recommend that when you come back, if you've not been able to avoid, let's say, the meal or the drink with your client, avoid carbohydrates for dinner and avoid carbohydrates for at least two meals the next day. But why the next day if I'm cutting out carbohydrates from dinner today? Because your goal is to keep carbohydrates low. It is not to maintain where it is at. It is not to manage diabetes in this line. It is to bring diabetes down, which means that you have to compensate for today's issue, and then you have to compensate again for tomorrow for missing today's deficit. And I hope this makes sense to all of you, because this is another large mistake I see busy professionals make, is that they think that, okay, this meal I messed up, next meal I'll make up, and they're done. But that's not how it works. It takes roughly at least 3 to 5 meals for you to make up this one meal, so that you can continue progress, not just stall yourself. But now that that is done, now that you have gone through the entire day, good. Now you've gone through travel. Hopefully you'll be sleeping better. But on top of that, one thing I always and I highly recommend is that even in your hotel room, do some muscular work. This can be body weight exercises, right? This can just be squats. This can just be push ups. This can just be a mix of both. This can just be you lifting your bag multiple times. The aim is to use your muscles, to grow your muscles. And why do I keep speaking about muscles? Look, guys, I hear a lot of people telling me that, no, Samad, I don't want to be bulky. I don't want to look like a bodybuilder. Now, let me tell you something very disappointing. This is the size of my arm. I have spent 16 years gaining 13 kilos of muscle as a natural lifter at this body weight, which is 72 kilos. My deadlift is roughly around 205 kilos for one repetition. And I've still not been able to gain more than 13 kilos of muscle over 16 years of lifting naturally with the right amount of protein. So if you're somebody who thinks I don't want to become too muscular, I don't know what to say to you. That's sort of like saying, "Oh no, my steak is too juicy. My vegetables are too fresh. My lobster is too buttery." That's not a problem for you to worry. First, worry about getting out of diabetes, right? Because with having diabetes, you are going to face terrible recovery speeds as you grow older, especially after you cross your mid 50s. And if any of your parents had been diagnosed with diabetes in their 40s, and you think, wait, my dad was active even though he had diabetes. Yes, because your dad was from a different time. He was not from a time where you can get Swiggy and Zomato and you can order in enough calories in a day that your ancestors would have taken 4 days to find and eat. So don't compare yourself like that. What you need to do is you need to understand what works for you and do it repeatedly. Right? When I say repeatedly, it is most likely going to be a lot more than you think. But on a natural standpoint, although what I have said may be difficult, it's hard to inculcate, you're not sure where it is exactly that you should do for your genetics based on your HbA1c levels, based on your allergies. Well, that is essentially why we hold these personal consults. And like I said before, all you need to do is comment the word rise, and my team will reach out to you for a personal consult with me. But if you are looking to do this by yourself, you're like, no, I don't want to invest in my health, I don't have time, I just want to do what a bare minimum I can do, this is what you need to do. Pre-plan your sleep, sleep more, sleep better, eat protein in your first meal. Do not waste your time going, I'm going to eat some idli sambar, or I'm going to just pick up something in the airport, or I'm going to eat in the flight. Do not do that. You are most likely going to know that you're going to travel. So get your protein in. And if you don't know, and this is ad hoc travel, most airports already have protein shakes in many shops. Get the protein shake, have that as your first meal. When you meet your people, whether it is your boss, whether it is your client, whether it is your team, whoever you've gone to travel to meet, either encourage them to eat healthy with you, and if you cannot, then eat what they eat. But remember, you need to give it 3 to 5 meals to compensate, not just one. And then sleep better that night. And hopefully, if you've not had any injuries or issues, which by the way we'll cover in the next life, injuries and diabetes, but if you don't have any injuries, please, 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 given that 10 minutes a day in your hotel room to just do some squats and push ups so that your muscles can actually help you absorb the sugar that may be in your blood. Now, will this cure diabetes? Questionable. Will this help you in a tough time to not make things worse? Highly likely. And I think at this point, that is good enough. Now, if you have any questions and you would just like to know the answers to a couple of things or clarify with what I'm saying, just drop me the question in my DMs. I'm happy to answer. But if not that, thank you for joining today's live. I will see you next week for our live on diabetes and injuries, on how to deal with it, how to get rid of it, and how to make sure that you come out moving in the right direction, not the wrong one. See you soon.